2:17 a.m. Amy Guan lay in bed, blanket pulled to her chin, eyes wide open, staring at the curtains. A shadow. Not a tree shadow. Not the swaying pattern of streetlight through leaves. A shape wider than a tree, closer to the window than any shadow cast by a street lamp. She didn't dare move, afraid the shadow would know she was awake. The curtain winded anyway. She could the curtain head suddenly sliding from left to right. Slow if the fabric from the Allura sealed silent. Amy reached for the bedside lamp. Her fingers stopped over stopper, switched up the switch. There were eyes behind the curtain. She couldn't see them. She could silent. The curtain didn't move, neither did the shadow. It stayed in the center of the curtain like someone waiting for acknowledgement. For about 3 seconds beat the window. Amy didn't see it disappear. She'd already closed her eyes in the dark, but in her sleep into the roof's darks. Amy lay in bed, forehead burning. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, her cheeks flushed with an unnatural red. A glass of water and a medicine bottle sat on the nightstand, the cap loose. No one else was in the room. The door was. Her eyes were closed, her body trembling slightly. Between sleep and waking, she felt hand rest on her forehead. It was cool, like it had just come in from outside. Her eyelids were too heavy to lift, but she felt that hand pause on her forehead, then move away. She heard the glass being lifted, water being soaked and wringed out. The wet towel was folded and placed on her forehead. Coolness spread from her brow, and her trembling slowly eased. That helped someone reach by the bed, not on a chair, but on the floor, leaning against the bed frame. After she spoke, the darkness over her eyes grew steadier. She fell asleep in that warmth. The rain kept falling. The curtain occasionally lifted in the wind, letting orange streetlight. Each daytime the light flashed. A massive shadow was visible on the floor beside near dawn. Then it slowly stood and slipped back out through the window.
Grandma, I can't sleep at night.
Why can't you sleep?
There's something outside the window.
This is a handkerchief I used in the forest many years ago. I wrapped it around an injured animal.
Did it get better?
I think so. When it left, it looked back at me. Its eyes were very dark, but when it looked at me, they were bright.
Can I keep it?
Keep it. If you're scared at night, put it under your pillow.
She turned over, mainting the twine, folded it, and flown she sell for the handkerchief. Tronger traced the edge of that nark marquee, but Hries fell asleep.
Grandma Wong was asleep downstairs. Amy lay in bed, the lights still on. Nightlight by glowed, the curtains were drawn. She let out a breath and turned off the nightlight. The room went dark. But 3 seconds after the light went out, the curtain moved, like it had been lifted of its windows, honed in, though the window in scales. At its head, 2 points of light appeared, not reflections but a faint dark green glow, like fireflies deep underwater. She didn't scream. Her breath stopped for about 2 seconds. Then she did something she'd never done before. She sat up.
Who are you?
Its shape shifting about a palm's width to the right, then stopping, like it had been startled by her question and taken a step back. Amy sat in bed, the blanket slipping from her shoulders, her fingers gripped its edge. But she didn't lie back down.
Are you protecting me?
The shadow didn't answer, but its shape slightly downward, like a head nodding yes. The shadow on the curtains through the gap between buildings make a low sustaining sound. That night she wasn't afraid anymore.
The next day, Amy went to her grandmother's room again. Grandma sat by the window knitting.
Grandma, that animal you talked about, did it ever come back?
Sometimes, late at night, I'd feel something outside the window, like someone standing outside, not knocking, just standing there. I never got up to look. I felt like it didn't want to be seen.
So you knew?
I knew something, but I didn't know how to tell you. Amy, some things aren't afraid of light, some are. But the things most afraid of light aren't always the scariest. Some things hide in the dark so they won't frighten you.
How long will it stay outside the window?
When you're not scared anymore, it might move a little farther away. But it won't disappear. It's just waiting for you to grow up.
Amy looked down at the handkerchief on her lap. The dark mark shimmered with an faint, nearly invisible glow of sun in the sunlight. She turned her gaze to the window. The distant skyline of the old city stood like jagged shadows against the light, lighter than safety.
The moving truck was parked at the door, workers loading furniture. Amy stood at the doorway holding a cardboard box of books and photos. She was 9. She looked back at her bedroom window. The curtain was eyed on the outer sill, where an extremely faint gray mark was visible. She touched it with her finger, then turned and walked toward the truck. As the truck pulled away from the old house, she sat in the passenger seat without looking back. But she wasn't sure if she'd seen something in the rearview mirror. On the highest branch of the old tree, a gray shape slowly pulling its hand back like it was confirming tightened on the edge of the box. Like words had reached her lips but stayed unspoken. Then she turned her gaze forward. She didn't know that after she left, that gray shape leaped across roofs and walls to the building across the street, crouching there, watching the truck disappear. It stayed for a long time, until the sky darkened and the streetlights, in the same directions, came on. Then it stood and moved along the building's shadows, like a path it had already walked before. The new house was on the other side of the city. The bedroom window faced a street and the building across. No trees, no branches to crouch on. The curtains were new-colored blackout. Amy lay in bed, the light on. She waited a long time. The curtains didn't move, no shadow. The street light cast a fixed patch of light unwavering. She stared at that still window for a while.
Are you still here?
She fell asleep clutching the handkerchief. After she slept on the rooftop of an abandoned building in the distance, a massive shape slowly rose from behind the railing. Its eyes opened and in the dark, the faintest green glow. The light from the nightlight in her window reached those eyes and bent softly, like an echo too distant to ever be heard. It stayed on that rooftop all night. In the dark, the massive shape moved along the edge of the street. Its form was nearly invisible among the shadows of buildings, its skin shifting shade with the changing light. It crossed half the city, over rooftops and walls without a sound. It stopped on the rooftop of an abandoned building across from the new house. From this position, Amy's bedroom window was perfectly visible. It crouched at the rooftop's edge, fingers resting on the concrete railing, eyes slowly opening. The light in that window went out at 10:10. It didn't move. It stayed on that rooftop along all path it had come. Just before leaving, its gaze paused on a detail below the window, a tiny space on the outer sill, just large enough for a hand's fingers. It held its own fingers above that space for a moment, then withdrew them, like confirming that it still couldn't reach. Then it turned and left. As its fingers pulled back from the outer sill edge, shallow, they lungrad, the mess excreting extremely marks on the left footprints behind. Not footprints, repertoire traces, dry patches as on damp ground where a layer of warm temperature evened out. Amy and her classmates were lining up on the playground. The sun was bright. She stood in the middle of the line, her hair tied in a ponytail.
Did you see that? There's a shadow in the tree at the end of the field.
She didn't turn around, her fingers pausing on her shirt. Another classmate answered.
That's just a tree shadow. Trees don't move. I just saw it shift.
Amy didn't turn around. She stood in line, staring straight ahead. But she knew there was no tree at the end of the field. That area was open ground, just a wall. She stood in the sunlight and felt a faint coolness on her back, like someone standing not far behind her, using their own body to block the sun from reaching her.
Is it you?
No voice answered. But that coolness on her back lingered for about 5 seconds, then faded. After school that day, Amy took a detour past the wall at the end of the field. She stood by it, saw nothing. Beyond was a narrow road and a block of old buildings waiting to be demolished. Her gaze paused at the sky above the wall for a moment, then turned and left. After Sefter Shreft, the second who lay had been stray crouching there a long time, finally standing and walking away. When Amy woke in the morning, the curtain was parted slightly. She glanced at the window out of habit. A faint mark was visible on the outer sill. Not bird droppings, not fallen leaves. A gray scratch, like something hard had rubbed against the sill's edge, its surface textured with fine grain. She sat up, threw on a jacket, and walked to the window. Extremely shallow, like a fingernail had grazed it without pressure. She sniffed her fingertip. No smell. She closed the window and told no one. But that night she kept the light on 15 minutes longer than usual. Her fingers rested on the inner edge of the sill, exactly where the mark was, like she was trying to touch the same point through glass and wall. Outside the moonlight was faint, the abandoned building's rooftop like a crouching beast in the dark. Her fingers paused there for a moment, then she pulled back and turned off the light. In the dark, she took out the handkerchief from under her pillow again, held it and turned over to face the wall. She didn't know if that scrape was new or had always been there, but her fingertips remembered its location. When Amy came home from school, Auntie Lou from next door was sitting in the living room, talking to her mother. She was about to head upstairs when she heard Auntie Lou say something that stopped her.
Lately, some folks in our neighborhood have been seeing strange things at night. Over in the old district, someone said they saw a huge dark figure crouching on a rooftop. A stray dog? Doesn't look like a dog. They say it's much bigger, like a person crouching, but taller than any person. Someone posted photos online. Everyone's asking what it is. Amy stood at the stair landed without moving.
The property management says if anyone sees it again, they'll call the police.
Do you think there's really something there?
I don't know. But my kid won't close the window at night lately, says there's a shadow outside. Amy's fingers tightened on the stair railing. Then she continued upstairs, pretending she hadn't heard. After closing her bedroom door, she stood there without moving. She looked down at her hand, her fingers still held that tight grip. She walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked out. The rooftop of the abandoned building was empty, nothing there. But her gaze paused at the roof's edge, and then she drew the curtain closed. Amy saw the photo on her phone. Someone had taken it from a distance, the rooftop of the abandoned building, the sky very dark. The photo grainy but faintly visible was a massive dark outline crouched behind the roof racking. Comments said it's photoshopped. One night I live nearby, actually stray dog dark thing bits crouching, but others said. Amy zoomed in on the photo, staring at that blurry outline for a long time. Her fingers stopped at the edge that shape. It was exactly the shadow she'd seen on her curtain. She screenshot it and saved it in a locked album, then turned off her phone. She lay down, staring at the ceiling, her mind gripping the package she couldn't relax. On her way to school, Amy passed the community notice board and saw a new flyer posted, black text on white paper titled regarding recent suspicious large animal sightings in Old District. She stood in front of the board, read the whole notice, then reached out and smoothed down its curled corner. Someone passed by and glanced at her. She ignored them. As she entered the school gate, she glanced back at the board, that small act of smoothing a curled corner like something too light to be remembered. She walked into the school building, sunline behind her stretching her shadow long across the ground. The end of her shadow briefly touched the shadow cast by the notice board. Before school let out in the afternoon, she passed the notice board and saw that the flyer had been taken down. Only a faint tape mark remained on the metal, like nothing had ever been there. She stood there and looked at it for an extra moment, then walked on with her backpack. She didn't dwell on who'd removed it, but her pace was slower than usual. Another late night. Amy hadn't slept. She sat on the bed, knees drawn to her chest, the curtain parted to crack. Moonlight lit the gap, casting a long white stripe across the bed. She looked at it she did never done before. She got out of bed, walked to the window and pulled the curtain open. Moonlight flooded of the abandoned building across the way. A massive shape crouched behind the railing. Silver moonlight fell on its scales, reflecting a dark gray-green sheen. It was larger than she'd imagined, broad shoulders, head slightly lower like a dent watch, each with firming catching the faint light. Amy stood at the window, moonlight on her face. She didn't step back, didn't scream. She looked at it, always knew was there but had never faced directly.
I know you.
She walked along the street for about 15 minutes, arriving at the abandoned building. The iron gate was chained, but the chain was loose. She squeezed through the gap sideways. No lights on the stairs. She used her phone screen to light the steps, climbing to the top floor. The rooftop door was ajar. Its rusted hinges let out a sharp metallic screech as she pushed it open. She stepped out. Night wind hit her face, carrying the dry dust of the old district. She stood in the center of the rooftop and looked up at the shape crouched behind them. Moonlight was faint, but she could see it clearly. A faded scar on its shoulder where the scales had an irregular gap. Its edges smooth over. Its head turned toward her, its eyes opened partially. Dark green light, dim as if restraining itself from shining too brightly.
Her about 10 voice was staring in the night wind. It's you, isn't it? You've been outside my window.
It didn't answer, didn't move, but it lowered its head, her fingers slightly at her sides, but she stepped forward. It didn't step back.
The wind passed between the buildings. Amy stood about 7 paces from it, looking up. Its height was more obvious up close, about 2.5 meters tall, crouched, its shoulders rising above her head. Its skin shimmered faintly in the moonlight.
You've grown.
You were the one that night 10 years ago. When I had the fever.
Its head moved slightly, like a nod.
Your parents weren't home. The neighbors were asleep. You shouldn't have been alone.
You've been outside my window all these years.
Yes.
She stood there, the night wind passing steadily over the rooftop. Moonlight fell on the old scar on its shoulder, its shape like something that had healed slowly after being cut by something sharp. Her gaze paused on that wound, but she didn't ask how it had gotten there. Amy didn't back away. Her gaze moved over its outline. She saw that old scar on its shoulder where the scales were missing.
Why do you guard me?
It was silent for a while. Its eyes blinked, all of them closing and opening at once, like a physiologic expression of thought. Then its voice rose in her mind, its tone calm.
Many years ago, your grandmother bandaged my wound in the forest. She didn't know was, but she wasn't afraid. She placed a clean cloth over my injury.
You're so dark. You should hide in darker places.
Later, she passed away. I passed by your doorstep and saw you. You were crying at the window. Your eyes were the same as hers.
Amy stood there, the wind steady, her fingers slowly relaxing.
My grandmother never mentioned that.
Its voice in her mind.
She didn't know how to tell anyone.
She thought it was just a dream.
Amy's gaze rested on that shoulder scar, its location roughly matching the dark mark on her grandmother's handkerchief. Her lips opened slightly.
You saw her.
Amy stepped closer. Now she was about 4 spaces away. She could see its scales more clearly, each about the size of a coin, tightly packed, with faint ridges along their edges, a dozen of them varying as large the size of her palm. Their light was restrained like they'd been dimmed to the lowest setting. Her gaze paused on one eye. It was slightly larger than the others, carrying a faint hint of blue within its dark green glow. She asked a question she'd always wanted to ask.
Can I touch you?
Its head tilted slightly, then it slowly, extremely slowly, extended a hand, like they'd been worn smoother. It placed its palm facing up before her. She reached out with her right hand, her fingers landing on its palm. The touch was warm, slightly cooler than human body temperature, but carrying a steady internal warmth, like something slowly moving beneath. The scale surface was smooth, edges fine like stone polished naturally over years. Her fingers paused there for a moment. Then she withdrew her hand.
Its voice came into her mind.
Only your grandmother has touched me.
The next morning, Amy sat on the living room sofa scrolling her phone. The discussion about that photo was still going on. Someone had shared it with the caption, "Unidentified large creature found on abandoned building in old district suggests on authorities take notice." Comments mentioned maybe a bear, maybe a large stray dog, maybe some kind of protected animal. But a few comments had a different tone. I live nearby. I've actually seen a dark figure at night over the years. Does anyone else feel like it's looking in a certain direction? Amy saw a comment folded below, with few likes. I've lived there for 20 years. Only one house. It's watched her grow up. She didn't like it, didn't comment. Sitting there for a moment. Then she stood. Walked slowly to the window. The distant skyline of the old district stood as jagged shadows in the backlight. She didn't see anything, but she knew it was somewhere out there. She stood there without moving, just looking in that direction. Then she drew the curtain closed and returned to the sofa.
At dusk, a dark SUV parked on the street near the abandoned building. The vehicle had no markings, but through the windows the outlines of equipment were faintly visible. Telephoto lens, laptop, handheld thermal emiser. The door opened and a man in a dark coat stepped out. He scanned the perimeter of the abandoned building.
Then checked the iron gate's chain. It was loose, with signs of someone having squeezed through sideways. He crouched and took photos with his phone.
She's been here. Not a coincidence.
He put the radio back in his pocket and looked up toward the building's rooftop. His gaze fixed on a spot on the concrete guardrail of the house, where a tiny crack was clearly visible on the surface, with distinct indentations left by hard objects being gripped and pressed. He photographed that crack, then turned and walked back to the car. The car didn't start right away. The man inside looked at the photos on his phone.
It's protecting someone. We need to confirm which household.
After hanging up, he noted the coordinates of the abandoned building and the positions of surrounding residences in his notebook, then flipped to a fresh page.
Amy hadn't slept. She sat on the bed, knees drawn up, phone screen lighting her face. She was searching for photos of that person caught alone under the streetlight. No clear frontal shots on social media, though, captured by a surveillance camera across from the abandoned building. She zoomed in and saw the outline of that person's a long dark coat with a stand-up collar, a subtle reflection on the left chest like a metal badge or equipment clip. She saved the image and put the phone beside her pillow. She looked at the curtains.
If you're listening, someone took your picture. They're looking for you.
No response came from outside the window, but she felt a very faint current of disturbed air pass beneath the curtain, like something had shifted its position on the other side and then stopped. She buried her face in the pillow, reaching underneath it to hold her grandmother's handkerchief. It was still warm. Late at night, Amy came to the roof of the building alone again. The night was darker than last time, clouds covering most of the moonlight. It crouched behind the railing in the same spot, but its posture was slightly different, head raised slightly, facing the street, on alert.
You shouldn't be here.
Someone found you.
Its eyes all opened at that moment, but their glow was dimmer than usual.
Like it was deliberately lowering its presence. After a long time its voice came again.
I saw. He took photos. He's looking for your address.
He doesn't know it's me, he just knows it's someone nearby.
It was silent for a moment.
You need to move.
Amy didn't answer. She stood there looking at it, then asked.
Will you come with me?
When she asked, her voice wasn't loud, but after she spoke, she heard her own breathing in the night wind become clearer than before.
Its eyes blinked once.
I'm fine here.
Amy didn't answer. Her gaze dropped to the ground, then lifted.
Then I won't leave either.
Cole stood outside the barbed wire fence of the abandoned substation. He used pliers to cut a rusted section of wire and climbed over. Flashlight in hand, he walked towards a small building inside the yard. The beam lit up the roof. A compressed area was visible, like something heavy had crouched there. The indentation was roughly rectangular, about 2 meters wide, its edges clean. He jumped up, grabbed the roof edge, and pulled himself up, crouching to inspect its surface. Fine scratches remained, like marks made by the edge of scales. After taking a few photos, he jumped down and walked around the substation yard. In the corner of the inner wall, there were very dark, compressed ground marks, like something had pressed down there. He crouched and touched the spot. The soil was macness on the surface, like it had been formed by years of reapers in contact at the same temperature. He placed his hand flat on the ground and felt a faint warmth. His fingers stopped. It wasn't an illusion. Something had been here recently. He stood and looked around, his flashlight beam sweeping an arc through the dark. Then he heard a sound, very far away, very low, like a sustained vibration from deep underground. He didn't search further, put away his flashlight, and climbed back over the fence the same way. Cole sat at a terminal in the municipal archives, the screen displaying land records for the old district. He pulled up all residential plots within 300 meters of the abandoned building and screened them one by one. He found Amy Guang's name and address, but when he tried to view the detailed file, The system displayed a prompting. This record is access protected. Please enter authorization code. He didn't have that code. He tried a few ways around it. The system's access protection was tighter than he'd expected. He sat in front of the terminal for a moment, then took a photo of the screen with his phone and made a call. Run a name for me. Amy Guang, Old Dis District. The system has an access lock, not standard protection, manually set. Cole spent 2 days bypassing the access protection. Through an old database interface still running, he used a set of forgotten system administrator default credentials to enter the archival system. Amy Guang's complete land record appeared on screen. Name, family information, move-in record from 12 years ago. He scrolled to the bottom notes section. There was a scanned line of handwriting, the script messy. Monitor. The note was entered 5 years ago. The signature line had been obscured, unidentifiable. Cole stared at that line for a long time, the obscured signature field on screen like a door half closed. He took a photo of the note, then shut down the terminal. He didn't speak, but his gaze swept over the words long-term unidentified presence marks observed twice. He stood up and walked back to his car, sitting in the driver's seat and sending an email to his superior. Target entity confirmed to have long-term association with human individual. Recommend expanding tracking scope.
When Amy pushed open the front door and walked down the steps, she saw a dark SUV parked across the street, its window half down. She didn't slow her pace, heading toward the convenience store. Her peripheral vision sweeping the vehicle, she saw the man in the driver's seat, dark coat, stand-up collar, around 40, looking at his phone without lifting his head. She went into the convenience store for about 5 minutes and bought a bottle of water. When she came out, the SUV was still there. She walked home at a steady pace.
Living room curtain aside, just a crack, and looked out. The SUV was still there. She let the curtain fall, picked up her phone and sent a message to the number without a name stored. He found our house. She didn't wait for a reply, set the phone on the table and drew the curtain. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she reached under the pillow and touched her grandmother's handkerchief, then put it back.
Amy packed her things in the bedroom. She put in a few clothes, her grandmother's notebook, her phone charger. She didn't take much. Zipped up the backpack and set it by the bed.
Did you hear my message this afternoon?
A very faint current of air stirred at the bottom of the curtain, like something had shifted on the other side. I saw.
He might make a move tonight. I don't know who he is, but he's not here to help.
Leave here. Head north. The ground there is closer to the forest roots. I'll follow behind you.
How far can you follow?
1 step farther than you think. Just not beyond that. Amy stood by the window, looking at the silhouette of the abandoned building in the night. The moonlight from the west casting its long shadow across the ground. That shadow stretched from the building's base, looking at the silhouette of the abandoned building in the night. The moonlight from the west, casting its long shadow across the ground. That shadow stretched from the building's base all the way to the road on the other side.
Cole returned to the abandoned building at 1 a.m. He brought more equipment, a handheld acoustic detector, a thermal imageuter, a pistol in a holster. He didn't turn on his flashlight, moving through the dark with night revision. He circled to the back of the building, where an iron door led to the basement. He pushed the door open. Stairs led downward, the air damp with the smell of earth and old cement. He followed the stairs to the floor was concrete. A section at the corner had a different color from the rest, like it had been patched. He crouched and knocked on it. The sound was hollow. He found a tool and pried open the patch,
revealing a downward opening. Faint light came from the depths. Dark green, like the dim glow of...
I found its nest. Cole climbed down about 5 meters through the opening, landing on the ground below. The flashlight beam illuminated a narrow space, about 10 square meters, walls made of earth and rock mixed together, their surfaces covered in fine scratches like those made by claws. In the center of the space was an oval area of compressed soil, like the mark left by something that had crowded there for long periods. The dark green light came from small crystals embedded in the walls, few in number, very dim, like deliberately dimmed nightlights. Cole stood in the center of the space, recording a panoramic video with his phone. Then he heard breathing, very light but long, like someone exhaling slowly at the edge of his consciousness. He stopped and didn't turn around. He felt a massive, warm presence behind him, less than 2 meters away. Didn't speak, just stood behind him. The dark green light formed a soft, dim illumination around its head and shoulders.
Cole didn't move. His fingers paused on the gun grip, but didn't draw.
I'm not here to kill you. I'm here to confirm you exist.
No voice answered from behind him, but that low vibration stopped. Cole clearly perceives the warm, massive outline.
How long have you been here?
No answer. Silence lasted about 10 seconds.
Longer than your records.
You can speak to people?
Only specific ones.
What's her name?
You won't get her name from me.
Cole stood in that space, slowly turned around, and saw it. Larger than the photos, clearer than the thermal imaging suggested. Those eyes were quiet in the dark green glow like displays set to minimum brightness. He looked at those eyes and they looked back at him. Cole's gun stayed in its holster. His other hand held a recording device, its red indicator showing it was running.
My job is to document, not eliminate. I'm not a hunter.
But some will be.
I'll leave. But someone got here before me. You might have less than 3 hours. I'm not on your side, but I'm not on theirs either. She's a good kid. Don't let her see you hurt.
Amy walked quickly along the road on the north side of the city. She didn't look back. The streetlights grew farther apart. The buildings lower and sparser. At the end of the road was a forest, the trees not tall but dense, like a natural boundary at the city's edge. As she stepped into the forest's edge, she felt the ground change beneath her shoes, from asphalt to soil, from hard to soft, slightly, and looked back at the path behind her. The city's lights formed a blurred orange halo in the distance. She didn't see anyone following, but she didn't see it either. She kept walking deeper into the forest. She stopped beside a large tree, placing her hand on its bark and whispering,
Are you here?
No answer, but her fingers felt the bark vibrating faintly, like something was traveling through the trunk from the roots into her palm. Amy continued north along a forest path covered in fallen leaves. The farther she went, the softer the ground became, like the soil had been turned over frequently. She stopped at a clearing in the woods. A denture lay a fallen old tree. Her fingers felt of its steady bark on, the same temperature as its palm.
You've always been able to reach this place, haven't you?
No answer, but the trunk kept radiating that warmth beneath her palm. She pressed her palm flat against the trunk. That warmth seeped slowly through the wood's grain. She didn't know how long she crouched there, but when she stood up had left faint temperature imprint on the trunk. That imprint was slowly matching the surrounding wood's temperature, fading very gradually. She turned and continued north, without looking back. It was starting to get light. A very pale gray-white rose above the treetops on the eastern horizon. Amy reached the forest's edge. A barbed wire fence stood before her, about 3 meters high, topped with razor wire. Beyond it was Owantis fading, and thinner the warmth from the earth's rolling hills. Her fingers paused on the wire, then she turned to look back at the forest behind her. Morning light was slowly filtering through, forming long columns of light between the trees. Deep in the woods, an area was darker than the rest, like a compressed knot of shadow. Amy stood at the fence, hand on the wire. Her gaze passed through the boundary between morning light and tree shadow to rest on that dark outline. No answer, but that massive shadow shifted slightly, a very small motion, like a nod. Amy stood at the fence. 2 shadows overlapped briefly in the morning light. Like contact. Then she let go of the wire and turned, grow blurry out to the field be morning light. Like it was slowly dissolving back into the earth's breath. The shadows in the forest were being compressed by the light. The tree shadow area where it stood was shrinking slowly. Its outline grew clearer as the light advanced.
After dawn, my shadow will be smaller. But it won't disappear. Then wait for me to come back. I've always been here.
Cole sat in a windowless room, a laptop before him. On the screen was a document in progress, including his findings from the past few days into the report, the access lock in the land records, the nest beneath the abandoned building, and his contact with the target entity there. His hand paused over the keyboard, Archive Investigation, placing it in the drawer. As he left the room, the lights went out behind him automatically. The door made a short metallic click as it closed.
Amy sat on the bed in her new room. It was small, but it had a window, looking out onto a quiet street. She turned off the light and sat in the chair by the window, looking out at the night, the crate. The Loton was over the street, Moon was behind clouds, kept a smile, its light faint. She stood up, walked to the window and pushed open. Night air rushed in, carrying the smell of soil and plant roots. She placed both hands on the sill. On the outside of the sill, there was a new mark, not a scratch, but one left by temperature. Her gaze stopped on that outline, much larger than a human hand, its shape matching in the one in her memory perfectly. She placed one hand over that outline. Her fingers were much smaller, but the temperature was the same. She stood there, the night wind flowing steadily over the windowsill. Her other hand was still on the sill, her fingertips tracing the outline's edge once. That outline held its shape in the moisture, like it had just been pressed there, not yet smooth flat by the air, just temperature.
The windows don't have to hide. outside.
She didn't close the window. She sat back in her chair, took the handkerchief from her pocket, and placed it on her lap. When she woke, the same dry circular patch appeared at the bottom, in almost the same spot as the day before. She didn't tell anyone, but she started putting a bowl of water on the windowsill every day. The dry patch was usually on the left side of the bowl, occasionally shifting to the right. She recorded the position changes in her notebook, making a small noting, but only she could read it. She unfolded it. That dark mark on its edge caught a very faint, nearly invisible gleam in the moonlight. She ran her thumb along the mark's length once. Then she folded the handkerchief and put it back in her pocket. The shaking of the tree shadows outside them from the rest of the west, but one area moved and had found a new place there, crouching quietly. One night, Amy placed a bowl of water outside the window. Its surface was still, unmoving. When she woke the next morning, the bowl was still there. The water hadn't gone down, but at the bottom of the bowl there was a very small circular dry patch. Its edges were smooth, like a poor toilet gathered several days it still and took the bowl inside. She filled the bowl with water again and set it on the windowsill. Amy had been living in the new room for a month now. The curtain stayed open, the window was left cracked every night. A bowl sat on the windowsill. Its water changed daily. In the evenings, she sat and looked up and glanced out by the window, her gaze pausing briefly among the edge for tree shadows like she was listening for something other than the wind outside. By the next morning, the water in the bowl would be lower, sometimes very slightly, like moisture carried off, but on the edge, a full circular dry spot would care off the bottom. Over a dozen now. She dubbed tribal mama is the stacked info perquich of the dry patch. She washed she waxed and stacked inch freshed him as a rest bowl neatly like waiting for an answer that she wasn't the only one still here. The water bowl on the windowsill had been replaced over 30 times, each one washed clean. Her hair fell past tremor saving him by her Easter, Kira, Twitter preface challengers her features sharpening. A textbook open on her lap, the desk lamp casting a warm yellows and pages, but her eyes weren't on the book, they were on the water bowl on the windowsill. She stood up, walked to the windowsill and bound to look at the bottom of the bowl. The dry circular patch was still there, almost exactly where it had been yesterday, slightly to the left, its edges clean. She picked up her mouth at flower pot in the bowl, not a smile, more like a small creeping into the soil. She refilled it, placed it back, let her fingers pause on the rim before letting go.
No wind today, you're still over there.
There was no answer from outside, but the shadows of the low trees across the street shifted slightly, more than the others, as if something inside them had adjusted its crouching position.
That's okay. I'm glad you're still here.
Her voice hung light in the quiet room, like a sentence carefully placed, waiting to be received by something listening.
The archive. Fluorescent lights hummed a low, continuous spin, casting a pale eve of old paper and scent metal cabinets, dry and slightly cool. And that's Cornins or Brewpate, blurry dark social in his cabinets, shot from a distance, but the corners were worn as if it had been opened this strakeable. He didn't pursue it, didn't try to verify it. He placed the photos back in the box and returned the box to its short in the cabinet. He stood before the cabinet's finger, the box's spine, as if confirming it was still there. Then he turned and left the room, if destroying finger back in the cabinet. Light from the end of the parlor that walked down the corridor without looking back.
When Amy came home from school, she noticed a thin, elongated water stain on the inside wall of her bedroom windowsill. Its color was slightly darker than the surrounding wall, a pale brown like an old mark slowly seeping into the plaster. Ran up fingers thick its tail disappearing the baseboard. It was on the left side of the sib, exactly where the water bowl sat. She dropped her bag and crouched beside the stain, touching the wall with her fingertip. It was dry. But the surface had a faint dust smudge texture, not a fingerprint, more like the mark left by a broad surface covered in fine grain, resting there for a moment. She stood, opened the window, and leaned out to look at the exterior wall beneath the sill. On the gray-white surface, there was a faint and smooth edge like the mark of a giant hand, or the impression by a large body leaning against it. In the center of that indentation ran a thin scratch. That night, she tilted a bold on the MSF sill, from which she welled deeper with them from the kitchen before Deneftif leaned and stealthily followed direct in spills. She hadn't slept. The curtains were open, and the moon was bright, casting a white square of light on the sill, its edges cut neatly by the window frame. The water in the bowl was still, reflecting the moonlight like a small piece of sky brought indoors. She sat on her bed, her gaze fixed on the bowl's rim, her breathing even and quiet. A very shallow indentation had appeared on the rim, barely noticeable unless you looked closely, as if something hard had pressed against it and then mostly rebounded after the pressure lifted. Thea measured the length and light away with her eyes, then got out of bed. She extended her right index finger and traced along the contour of the indentation. It was smooth to the touch with clean edges, like something cool had been drawn across it at an even speed, but the depth was only about half a millimeter. Her fingertip feel reveals minute variance. She stood up, moved the bowl to the other side of the sill, about a hand's width from its original spot. Then she went back to bed, lay down and didn't turn off the light. She stared at the bowl's direction for about half a minute, then fading into the region where the moonlight didn't reach. She shifted her gaze to the window, feeling the lingering temperature on her fingertips. At breakfast, Amy sat at the table. A thin layer of frost left by the night's moisture solidifying on the surface. Through that a band of fruit and warmth the wrenches good a wind thin care trickles of water. She thought on the windowsill in the one that never frost over, not because of the temperature, but because something always stood outside. She didn't know where it was crouching now, or what a northern winter meant to it. Her finger paused in the moisture and didn't draw a second line. She stood up, carried the bowl of water till and set it down. She noticed that the side near the radiator was warmer. The tiles held a steady warmth. She moved the bowl to that side, closest to the room's interior, but tough lead was as the day before. The dry patch had shifted to the right side of the rim, rhythm, as if someone had adjusted the bowl's position while holding it, moving it closer to warmth. She looked at that shift, he pulled a fold, didn't move it further, and getting a folded piece of old cloth from the drawer, dark gray cotton, frayed at the edges, something she'd brought from the old lady's wardrobe, and fold a layer of thickness now sat between the bowl and the sills. The shift didn't reappear.
One of the fluorescent lubes was flickering, like they're fastened or someone perpetually hesitating. Cole walked into the underground archive and caught the familiar smell. Old paper, time that dry could sound the ablative accumulations. Run his fingers along the spines of the doors until he found the slocked X of alignments. He pulled the door open, took out the box, and lifted the lid. Only one sentence on it, written in black ballpoint, the handwriting neat and restrained. He looked at it for a while, as if trying to read more from the slant and spacing of the letters, but the sentence offered nothing further. He placed it back in the box, closed the lid, and returned the box to the steel closet. As he closed the cabinet door, his fingers paused at its edge. The metal was cool to the touch. For a moment, for a memory of this alto briefs temperature. He fitted his hand back into maybe stooping to the archives in the when this briefly dented there for a moment, then receded before he could catch it.
Night, interior, new home in the north, Amy's bedroom, 2 years later. Amy was 18. She didn't celebrate her coming of age. That night she sat by the windowsill for a long time, holding an old handkerchief. She no longer checked it every day. She'd just glance at the bowl's direction before sleep, confirming it was still there, like acknowledging a question that didn't need to be spoken, still quietly held in place, sometimes consecutive nights, sometimes with gaps. But she no longer checked it every day. She'd just glance at the bowl's direction before sleep, confirming it was still there, like acknowledging a question that didn't need to be spoken, still quietly held in place, then turn off the light. That night the moon was bright, the clouds thin, and moonlight spread across the sill in an even white sheet. After she turned off the light and passed the window, her peripheral vision caught a glint from the bowl's bottom, not reflected moonlight, but something that seemed to rise from the bowl's depths on its own, thin and steady. She stopped and looked down. At the bottom of the bowl was an extremely thin layer of reflection like a film of ice, but not ice, it was color, pale green like redly from deep water, compressed and filtered through the water column before settling on the bowl's inner wall. The color extended upward from the bottom, its edges blurred like the roots of a slow-growing plant. She crouched down, didn't reach out to touch it. The color lay at the bottom of the water's surface, its shape and incomplete had pressed it from below, its edges soft, as if it had seeped out from the bowl's own natural grain. She watched for about 10 seconds, the color didn't change. It stayed fixed there, like a contact point that still existed between the sill and the tree shadows now compressed into the bottom of the bowl. She stood up, didn't touch it, didn't pour the water out. She went back to bed and lay down. Just before sleep took her, she turned to face the window. That pale green light was still at the bottom of the bowl. Night, interior, new apartment, Amy's bedroom, 2 years later. Amy was 21. She'd moved out of the northern house and into an apartment closer to university. The new room was small, with a west-facing window, and a sill half the width of the old one, just big enough for one bowl. A few bits of debris that had fallen from the old city's windowsill. A photograph of a thin layer of frost that had formed in a window crack one northern winter. A pencil sketch of that abandoned building's rooftop in moonlight. Its lines somewhat faded now, the graphite almost worn smooth from handling, but she'd never retraced them. The bowl of water was still filled each night and placed on that narrow sit. She no longer checked its bottom every day for new marks, but she still remembered to change the water every night, like following a line of inertia long since formed, no longer needing to check its boundaries. Pour, refill, replace. Sometimes she'd let her finger pause on the bowl's rim as she set it down, an unconscious confirmation. In her first month in the new apartment, she paused as she passed a mirror and saw her own face overlapped for a moment with that little girl who used to stare at the curtains. In the mirror, her features more prominent, shoulder lines steadier, but her gaze hadn't changed. It still carried that habit of looking toward some direction she couldn't explain. She paused in front of the mirror for about 5 seconds. Then she picked up the bowl from the windowsill, refilled it, and set it back in place. Later, on an ordinary night with no moon, she walked to the window and saw a thin, elongated scratch along the edge of the sill. Its shape was irregular, its edges smooth as if something hard had been drawn slowly across its surface. Scratch was about 1 millimeter deep and roughly the width of a finger. No dust had settled in it as if it had just been made. She stood there for a while, then lifted the bowl from the sill and set it gently on the table. She left the window cracked open. Cold air seeped through the gap, forming a thin, almost invisible layer of condensation on the sill. She walked back to bed, lay down. She didn't know when that scratch had been made. But before she closed her eyes, her gaze rested on it for a brief moment, like a sentence she didn't need to finish reading, still quietly placed in the same spot, waiting for a new touch, waiting for a stretch of time not yet written, to begin its slow inscription again under some night's starlight.